I never wanted anyone in my team to feel like a task was beneath me. Sometimes if you don't know how complicated it is, you also don't know what you're asking someone else to do. So I still think there's a benefit to understanding the very basics so you don't go above and beyond.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Welcome back to the podcast on podcasting. It's your host, Adam A. Adams, and I'm joined today with Nikki Green, who has spent, I think, over a decade. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but she's spent quite a while in Fortune 500 companies. And right now she teaches and coaches those who are wanting to join top 500 companies, right? Those people who are graduating college and getting ready to move into there. And so she created this podcast. The podcast name is called Stand Up and Stand Out, which helps her avatar, those people that are going through college and wanting to have a really nice career to be able to provide for their families. She supports them and she does it through her podcast. Again, that's Stand Up and Stand Out. Easily scroll down right now and you could be able to see that link. So Nikki's on with me. So what I'm going to do is, Nikki, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast, Stand Up and Stand Out. The first thing that I know is that you're about 6 months in. And I love that because you are a little closer to some of those lessons learned than somebody who might have been doing this for 3 or 4 years. So you're really going to be able to speak to our listener who might be just about to start a podcast. And really what I want to talk about first is, yes, you launched it 6 months ago as we record, but I wonder, when did you think to yourself for the first time, I want to have a podcast? I might need to have a podcast. A podcast would help my business, or I want to give back. Or somebody first told you, Nikki, you got to be a podcast host. So when was that?
Yeah, well, like you said, I've been living under a corporate rock for about the past 20 years. So I haven't had much time to listen to podcasts. I heard a lot about them. My brother was always telling me about them. My brother even had a podcast for a while. And I never had the time. And so when I left my job to become a motivational speaker, I didn't dream that this would be in my home office in my fuzzy slippers. I thought it would be on a stage. And so a lot of people were really encouraging me, a great way to get your message out is to have your own podcast. You can bring the audience to you and still stay at home in your fuzzy slippers, but start to learn a new craft and start to meet lots of cool people. And so it's been super, super fun.
That's awesome. So thinking about the title, what made you pick this title for your podcast?
Yeah, a lot about what I'm trying to teach, whether that's through the podcast or other avenues I have with my business, is really about trying to find that unique part of yourself, about being comfortable with who you are and knowing when to use that to stand up and really differentiate yourself from the crowd. But also, there's been a lot of turmoil going on in the world. And the standout part is also making sure you're true to your values too, right? And we're not just conforming, which happens a lot of times when you go into corporate jobs, you kind of feel that pressure that you need to be something, whether that's really who you are or not. So
with all of your friends telling you, your brother having a podcast, and you never had the time, you said, because of your corporate career, what was ultimately the catalyst? Like the one thing that said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I know that you stopped working your corporate career. You started doing more speaking. You had a little bit more time freedom, but that in and of itself probably doesn't make somebody absolutely decide I'm going to jump full 2 feet in. So what was it that made that happen for you?
Well, I am actually one of those people that just goes feet first. And I always jump straight into the deep end to a lot of things, not just my professional career. And I had this benefit of a year of freedom to follow whatever my interests were. I didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to result in a monetization. It was like, let's just see how it goes. So I wanted to experiment and improve, learn and develop, and then specialize and partner with people that did it better. Because that's it, right? If we don't don't try, we don't know. And I thought, we'll see. But now here I am getting ready for season 2 and almost ready for season 3. I really fell in love with the medium when I started playing around with it.
So I really want to see how deep we can go with this. The main answer that I heard was, well, I started because I had a year of freedom. I didn't need to be perfect. But can we dive even deeper? Like, what was this big why? And nobody starts a podcast willy-nilly. Like, it's like, oh, I just have a year of freedom, so I may as well have a podcast. There's got to be some reason why you decided, I have to do this. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah. I thought about, I could have a YouTube channel, and there's lots of different mediums out there. And the one thing I liked about podcasting is I could actually use it multi-purpose, is that I could start with the podcast. I could record on Zoom. I can repurpose that video if I do want to do YouTube, that it wasn't just one thing. And I could even just use excerpts of that audio, and I could use it for audition tapes when I was trying to get on stages. And I could continue to share my message, whether anyone was listening or not yet, but start to get that message and perfect my talks and meet lots of amazing people in the process.
So here's a couple parts that I definitely heard. The message and the practice was two big things. And I love that. When I heard you mention that there's a lot of mediums out there, like YouTube and podcasting and whatever else, there could be blogs and who knows. But when we're talking about mediums, it sounds obvious to me that you knew and had a desire or like a premonition or an expectation about having a thought leadership platform, that it mattered. So I understand that you definitely get to create the message, craft the message, stay in front of people, regardless if people are listening to, you're still being able to improve on that. And I think that's a great takeaway for all of us. I want to perfect my message. How can I do that? I can have a podcast and say my message frequently. And that other piece with the practice is the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And also, you didn't specifically say this, but it's like a lot of times when you're interviewing somebody or even just spending the time to create the content, that allows you to add value to the right person, make sure that you're saying it concisely. But I want to go back even further and talk about your desire or your need or your premonition or your expectation of what any thought leadership platform, a book, a YouTube channel. Why did you think that you had to do something?
I think now is such a different time, right? And it's not enough that we can all just sit back. I'd been sitting back long enough. And there was a catalyst for me leaving my job, but I didn't want that to be the thing that defined me. I wanted to redefine and start to help people. I think I always had that as even a young person, that I wanted to do more with who I was and what my purpose was. And so starting to pursue that and helping others also pursue their passion, not just find it, but actually pursue it, actually feel like it's achievable, no matter what age you are, no matter what transition you're going through, but to start to show people this is how you pursue your passion, and just put my foot right in front of the other and go do it. Right. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So part of it was a need that you've always had for helping others and increasing what they're doing. I like that. So a lot of good reasons to start a podcast. What I want to find out is, over the last 6 months plus, since you thought about having a podcast, since you were determined, I'm going to just launch it, I need to have it, this is going to benefit me and my business and other people in so many ways. What have you learned? What challenges have you run into? And how can your experience support our listener who might be starting a podcast right now?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, podcasting is fun. It's a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. Now, there's work to it, as with everything, to actually craft a show. And I say the same thing about writing. I like the creative process of it. I had the right people to help me, but at the wrong times. For the first 5 episodes, I didn't have anyone to edit. I had to do all the editing myself. I was lucky I found Descript, which was a good starter program for me to start using, and they had webinars every week. So again, I could learn, but I learned very quickly I didn't want to do editing. And so I quickly brought on an intern who was a musician who not only has an ear for sound, but also an interest in learning more about the editing process. And so it ended up being win-win for both of us that, one, I can help mentor someone about growing their business and also give them an opportunity to experiment, because I don't know that much about editing. So anything he brings to the table is going to be a benefit, and I don't have to do it. So, works out great.
Yeah, that's good. So I've gotten a couple takeaways from what you've discussed there. So you mentioned that you edited your first 5 episodes. I get a lot of people that, I'm of the opinion, never edit an episode of your own, ever, not even one. But there's a huge counter argument, the complete opposite of that, that says if you want to really know who to hire, how to hire them, you have to at least understand how to edit, how you want it edited, what is all involved in that piece of pie. I disagree, and that's fine. I'm like, dude, I don't need to, like Henry Ford. Somebody said, hey, how do you do this one thing? And Henry Ford was like, I don't know. And the guy's like, you mean you have this business selling cars and building cars and you don't know what a windshield is or whatever? I don't remember. It's like, I have people around me that I can ask and have that answer to you in 2 minutes. Like, my team knows. Right. So anyway, I'm thinking about other podcasters and this advice that we always hear, that there's so many benefits to actually editing your own. Now, you've done 5. If you started and did this all over again, would you do 5 again? Would you do 10? Would you do 1, or would you do 0?
Yeah, I'd probably do about 1 minute of one.
1 minute. How come?
I learned it just really wasn't my forte. But I've done this throughout my career too, is I never wanted anyone in my team to feel like a task was beneath me. That it's sometimes, if you don't know how complicated it is, you also don't know what you're asking someone else to do. So I still think there's a benefit to understanding the very basics. So you don't go above and beyond and start saying, okay, well, I want 15 different edits and 5 different songs. And you start to get to a level of complexity where it's taking them a month to edit one episode. Get to some realistic, but specialize. The specialty I have is talking, it's hosting, it's being here as the voice. I don't need to also spend my time doing that. I need to grow my business in other ways. So
that's so good. One of the advice that I say to people all the time is you want to focus. I love how you put it. It's even better than what I always say. You focus on the thing, but you mentioned the word specialize. So if you are a speaker, and for example, and Nikki, this isn't a bash on you at all.
Go for it.
But if you're a speaker and accounting effing sucks, and you're like, I do not want to do accounting. I don't like accounting. It's not my forte. I might make mistakes. It takes me 7 hours to figure out one balance sheet. Then you need to have a bookkeeper, an accountant. You need to specialize. You need to get out of all of the roles, wearing all of the hats, and allow somebody who's much better than you at that task. And the same thing goes with editing a podcast. There are people out there that definitely say, I want to edit my own. I enjoy it. It's freedom for me. I don't care how long it takes. Now, to that person, I say, do it. Edit it as much as you want. If you just friggin' love it, you can edit it. But Nikki, I wonder about this. Time value of money. If you were good at editing, and even if you liked it, I'm curious if you would still specialize. Why or why not?
Yeah. And I think there's a trade-offs for every business, and it's a business, whether you're making money or it's a hobby, but the concept of how you run things and how you invest your time, not just spend your time, right? It's something I got from another great podcast, is that lesson that you are investing to build to the next thing, to build to the next episode, to build to the next season, to build whatever else you want in your dreams. You can't do that trade-off unless you're trading off eating, sleeping. You start start to run out of things. And why not give someone else an opportunity that doesn't want to be in front of the mic, that wants to learn the craft and be the production person or edit? There's so many things behind the scenes that can be done, not just even editing, right? That can help you grow your show. Why not, right? It really is beneficial to you, and do that trade-off. Get back to, hey, I got to see my family. I got to go for a run. Whatever the things are, they don't even have to be podcasting.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, now that you have an intern, is it a paid intern, an unpaid intern? Like, I guess what the listener wants to know is how much money is she spending to get her podcast episodes edited?
Yeah. And that really varies too with what you're doing with your business. I have an overall intern plan for my business because I focus on those trying to get some work experience that maybe have mostly schooling experience. I have a program with a company called Acadium where I book for an entire year. I get interns every quarter. They come do my social media, they work on my website, and then I add it in, having them do the podcast. So it's a great process because they help screen and interview the candidates. They also continue to give them certifications as they finish each internship. And then those people go on to get jobs. Now, if you really like your intern, like I did, then you keep them on board and you get to continue to build that relationship with them, or they go on to the next thing and get another internship or another more permanent job. So for me, it's been fantastic and a better process than trying to go through, let's say, Fiverr or Upworks or some of those contract ones, because you get mixed results. Yeah, you can read reviews and things. You're probably going to get a higher quality because they're hopefully experienced in what they're doing, but you're paying for it. So it's all about that. For me, first-time podcaster, I'm learning, they're learning. I'm totally fine with a few mistakes along the way. And then we continue to improve and we both grow together. So
it's free then?
So the intern is free through Acadium. I pay Acadium for the service of finding the interns.
Okay. How much is that? And I want to put Acadium in the show notes. So if you don't mind spelling it out for us real fast.
Yeah. Acadium.
Okay. Got it. And then, so how much is the service to get interns?
I can't remember at this point because I paid at the beginning of the year, but it's nominal for what you're getting. And it's way cheaper than doing, say, Fiverr or something, even for like a couple of episodes. So,
and then you mentioned one other thing. You mentioned that if you like your intern, like I did, you can keep them on. And I think you said like I did. So does that mean like that you had her or him for free for 3 months and then you decided to start paying them? Or can you tell us how that worked?
Yeah, so then you can convert them and have them work for your business. And again, that's a negotiation between you and the person and where they're at in their career and schooling and things like that. So yeah, I had my editing intern come on for me part-time. He still has other jobs that he works, but he's interested in this enough that it again contributes to his professional career as a musician. Right? So
that's cool. Got it. So you mentioned Dscript as well. I will be sure to have that into the show notes as one of the resources that we've talked about. Same thing with Acadium. But if you don't mind going into just a bit more detail of what Descript does, like pretend that I have never podcasted before and you're like, here's the cool thing about Descript. And then on top of that question, if you could just let us know, you mentioned I started with Descript. And I think it was something like, because I was new and it was like an easy platform. I'm also curious if that means that you've graduated from Dscript, and if so, what that might be. So tell us in layman's terms, what does Dscript do?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of a tech nerd since I've been working in tech for 20 years. So I do like experimenting with technologies and I can usually pick them up fairly quickly, but I didn't have a base in editing or sound. So the thing I had always read is I needed a blog or a transcript. I need some way for SEO to pick up my shows. And so the thing that Descript has that I haven't seen, but I don't have a broad spectrum of it, is it will immediately transcribe your episode off of the audio. And it does a fairly good job. You can then go back and kind of quickly do some small edits right in the text. So for me, that was number one. I wanted to make sure I was able to get those into, at the very least, a transcript. And now as I upgrade with season 2 into a more elaborate sort of article posting. The other part is that you can edit the video or audio off of the transcript. So when I had tried other software before, I was trying to move the little tiny lines on the audio thing, and I just did not have the finesse that it needed to hit the right spot. Whereas if I could go into the transcript and I could take out whatever things that were in there that shouldn't have been very quickly, or even en masse through the transcript, then it cleaned up the editing very fast. It also made it really chunky in some cases, so good and bad. But I learned very quickly the best way for me as an inexperienced editor to get a lot of features very quickly, even from the free version of Descript that I started.
Okay, so it sounds like Dscript has a free version, and then they have an upgraded version. I know my team uses one, and I think, but I'm not sure, it's around $15 a month, and it allows us enough because we have like a ton of clients that want transcriptions, and we'll run them through there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for 15-ish bucks, we can do mine and a bunch of our other clients. I'm not sure on that price, but we'll make sure that the Dscript link is in the show notes. Nikki, another thing that you mentioned that it has been able to do for you is in the past, the old way of editing for Nikki and your intern was, if you don't want to have a filler word, for example, okay, so, for another example, or or there's so many, but
yeah, exactly.
What you can basically do is you can, in a way, say what you want deleted, and it'll highlight all the things, and you can say if you want them or not, which ones to get rid of, and you can easily just push a button and it takes them away. But it sounds like what you're saying is on top of transcribing everything and showing you where the ums and uhs are and highlighting them and deleting them, it sounds like you've been able to also let that immediately impact the recording so that you're getting rid of ums and uhs with a click of the button. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I did at the very beginning. I was like, this is fantastic. And just a click of a button, you can clean all that stuff up. And so from a productivity perspective, it seemed great. Then as I had other people, the intern and other people audit the podcast and listen to it, they said, your audio sounds a little clunky. And you start to lose a little bit of the natural rhythm when people talk, that they take a breath, they do say whatever the pause is in there. And maybe they have one particular word they use a lot. And maybe if you saw it 15 times, you actually want to take out 5. Maybe you do want to leave 10 of them in there. You can get more refined with it. But I found when I was first doing it, I just sort of chopped it all and the audio went with it. So
yeah, I think this is important because there's 2 points that I'm hearing from that. One of them is not getting rid of every single filler word, because some of them sound natural on their own. Sometimes it's okay to have an or an in the recording because it feels more natural and it's more, I guess, what's the word for it? Approachable or relatable to the listener, right? But sometimes it gets annoying and you want to take some of them out. My team, when we edit other people's podcasts, we have a rule that we are supposed to take and only leave up to 2 filler words within 3 sentences.
Makes sense. And
that would almost be similar to what you mentioned. If you see it 15 or 20 times, you might cut out 5 or 10 or 15 of them. And so you're leaving some, you're taking out some. And the second takeaway that I heard was when using Dscript, because of natural echoes that we might have, or if there's a white noise behind, like an air conditioner or a fan or something behind us, or if we are in the middle of taking a breath right before we say or after we say it, then when just simply using Dscript, it doesn't always listen for that. And so you might end up having awkward sound, like where you hear part of a breath and then a different part of the breath, but kind of overlapping. So you know for a fact that there's been some editing. And this is just a takeaway for the listener. If you're going to edit these out, she's right, Nikki's right. using Dscript and just automating the take out the likes or ums or uhs might possibly not always sound good. And if you're going to spend the extra time or attention or have somebody on your team, let's say it's an intern or a virtual assistant or just an employee or a business partner editing this out, here's a takeaway for you. When my team cuts out an or an ah and it's in the middle of a couple of breaths, we cut out the very first breath all the way. From the end of the person's sound, we make it stop. And then right before they say the next thing, we allow for that entire breath. So from the beginning of the breath on, and you never have that overlap. And unfortunately, Dscript won't go to that length for you. You'll probably have to be the one editing this or sharing it with somebody else on your team. Nikki, speaking of I've said it a lot on this episode.
Did I jinx you with it?
I don't know. Sometimes it's either that I always say and I only notice when we're talking about or talking about makes me say it more. I'm not sure. I want
chicken and the egg on this
one.
one.
The second one, just because I'll feel a little bit better. So, with you and your podcast, you edited about 5 of the episodes and then pushed it off. If you had to do it again, you would edit only 1 minute of one episode and then push it off. What other things did you come across podcasting that you probably don't remember or didn't expect ever becoming a problem? What surprised you? And I'm asking this because it's probably going to surprise a new podcaster listening. And I want you to kind of streamline his or her success.
Yeah, you're going to get surprises, right? I mean, and that's the fun part of it sometimes is, oh, I didn't know about that. Just so many different tools that you need to stack everything up. I thought, hey, well, I've got Descript, I can edit, done. Oh, wait, no, I have to publish. Okay, so now I need to figure out who's going to actually host. Oh, but that host isn't necessarily a brand name that people know unless they're in podcasting. Now I have to go to different platforms. Oh, but now there's a whole bunch of platforms, and I use Anchor for my hosting, but it doesn't necessarily go to every single platform. So then now I'm trying to farm out to figure out which one am I missing and how do I even know how many listeners I'm getting and things like that. One good thing I did find about Anchor, though, actually, is because they're connected with Spotify, they have access to music, lots of music that you can interweave into the podcast. But then the downside of that I learned is, but then it only goes to Spotify, that it won't publish your episode with that licensed music to other places. So I was super excited.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I didn't know that. I don't use Anchor, and when we have new clients, I generally will say you get what you pay for, and Anchor's free. No offense to you, Nikki, or anyone who's grabbed Anchor. There's no real issue with Anchor, but I will say in general, if you are paying a decent dollar for it, sometimes you get more for paying. But you mentioned, I'm trying to remember, you mentioned that with Anchor, there's some music that they'll give you through Spotify, but this huge drawback that you learned maybe the hard way is that now it's not maybe going to be that piece, that episode might not be on Apple Podcast or Google Play or iHeart or Spotify, only Stitcher. Is that accurate?
Only Spotify, because that's part of Anchor.
Only Spotify. I might have switched them. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's the hard part. I mean, it was great because the episode is other people's podcast. So I wanted to use the OPP song from the 90s, which was very popular, and sort of weave that in because I thought it was kind of a cool reference. And it wasn't until I published that I realized I had that limitation. So I already had this great, what I thought was an amazing concept. And so the creativity sort of got ahead of the planning and execution. So would I do it again? Maybe if I felt like the music was going to be strong enough, but now also having a musician as a part of my editing team, I can just have him make custom music for us. And so we kind of learn to adapt and grow and do what is going to make sense for the show. So
a lot of cool stuff. Thank you. I'm glad you went into that. So you had a year of freedom and you decided to start a podcast for many reasons we already discussed. And you're about 6-ish months into that year of freedom. So what happens in 6-ish more months?
Yeah. So this has been 6 months for the podcast, 1 year for the business. So I had this sort of like New Year's resolution. Let's sit down and think about what did we like, what went well, about everything within the business, but including the podcast. And I just sat down and said, let's take podcasting for the example. Did I like podcasting? Oh, heck yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great. I finished my year by going to Podcast Movement in Nashville, connecting with lots of other podcasters. It felt like going to like ComicCon in the old days, just people that really love the creativity and the craft. And I learned a ton from all of that. And so it gave me new ideas for how to grow my show, how to develop as a host, what else I wanted to do. So it was fun. And then it's like, well, what am I missing? Well, I'm missing a lot of stuff because I just jumped into it. So as I build out season 2 and season 3, it's rethinking this a little bit more like what's the whole storyboard. I hosted a conference at the end of July and I recorded all the materials. And so what we're going to do is for folks that weren't able to attend the conference live is reuse that material throughout season 2 to bring back those lessons from a number of other great motivational speakers that speak to this niche of people and hopefully kind of connect them with some of that message.
We are going to do this. We're getting pretty close to the end. And so what I want to do is just take a break for our sponsor. And when we get back, I really want to talk about OPP. You did an episode on it. And because of that, other people's podcasts, you obviously think that there might be something beneficial to getting on other people's podcasts. So I want to give you some time to go through that. And then I think that the listener probably wants to know all of the systems, the tools that you use to make podcasting a little bit easier on you. We've already got Acadium and Dscript and perhaps Anchor, but I think you got some more. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Miss Nikki Green. Nikki, you want to get down with OPP and why?
Yeah, I thought one of the cool things that I had heard on a couple of other people's podcasts or even writers that I was following on Medium is just giving a shout out to someone else that's inspiring you as a creative artist. And so I was listening to different podcasts to get a better understanding. What was I missing? What kind of did I like format wise, guest wise, etc. So I thought of this concept of I'm going to do an episode OPP where I did a shout out to other people's podcasts that were inspiring me. But I also now I'm on a circuit of trying to talk on other people's podcasts, one, so I can see it live. What is your process like? How are you as a host? And it gives me exposure to their show as well, because then I'll listen to a few of their shows, make sure it's a good fit to match audiences. And I met a lot of cool people at Podcast Movement. So that was fun too, that just be able to do podcast swaps with people I actually met in person, not just on Zoom.
So there's a lot of good takeaways with you doing other people's podcasts. There was a couple things. One is that you are basically learning and getting ideas. And the other one is you're basically hacking other people's networks where you're able to get in front of a few of their listeners and maybe be able to bring them over to your podcast. And I like that both. You were able to say, what do I like? What don't I like? What are they doing that I'm not doing? What are their processes? What makes it easier on them? And if I can throw out one additional benefit to OPP, because you mentioned a ton, there is an interesting thing that happens when you share listeners from other podcasts. When their podcast, somebody else is listening to their podcast, it actually puts you next to them. And so it says to their listeners, you might also like Nikki Green's podcast.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge hack. The more you get to be on other people's shows, and if you can convert a couple of their listeners to yours, now the algorithms for Apple Podcasts are actually going to be promoting you more. So I thought that was another really good one. So you're learning and growing, you're getting on other people's networks, and you might possibly hack into the system to allow those algorithms to benefit your podcast.
Fingers crossed on that.
Yes. What systems and or tools have you found extremely useful in your podcasting process?
Yeah. And right now there's a ridiculous amount of free live webinars out there, and I can't handle them anymore because I think this time with podcasting over the past 6 months has really taught me that bad audio will not be tolerated, right? And that issues with the technology and not knowing how to mute people, all these problems, it's just really wasting people's time. And the beauty of podcasting that I've learned is to refine it, but also, as we talked about earlier, in a more natural way. So there's still a natural conversation going, but it is a bit more of an intimate setting. If you put more than 12 people on a Zoom call, there's no conversation, there's nothing happening, right? It's just people chit-chatting over each other, not on mute. With podcasting, I start with Zoom so that I have both the video and the audio together. It also gives me a good connection with the person so that I can see them, I can see their body reaction, just like I would if we were having a real conversation and sitting side by side. The hard part I learned with Zoom is making sure I have separate tracks for all of these things, separate video, separate audio. So again, it makes the editing easier. We are using Descript for our editing. Coming from Podcast Movement, we've learned a whole bunch of new tools and things that we're going to try over season 2. So give us again some leeway as we practice and start to again hone our craft. Again, the benefit with Descript is not just getting the ability to edit the video and the audio, but also be able to get that transcript in seconds. And it's been fairly accurate, other than maybe a couple of difficult accents where I've had to go through and do the editing. So those are kind of big ones.
any specific template that you might use? Or another question would be, you talked about Zoom, which is where you record. How about is there a calendar link that you use?
Yeah. So through all my scheduling, whether it's for speaking engagements or my book tour or just doing one-on-ones with people, I use Calendly. It plugs in super smoothly with my website, and I can quickly send them the link. I can have specific links for each parts of my business. So specific to the podcast itself, I have podcast guest as a part of the link. If it's for something else, right, there's a different ending. And then I can have different set times and schedules. So I also balance my time. I want to be focused when I get on a podcast. I don't want to be running from another meeting, stressed out, not sure what I'm talking about or who I'm talking to. I want to be planful and have a good bracket of time before and after to take some deep breaths and prepare and also decompress, versus other stuff. And maybe I can compact them more in a day and have 5 or 6, one-on-ones with people. So
good stuff. When you do your Calendly, one thing that I like about it for me is it helps me to time block. For example, my Wednesdays are a lot of podcast interviews, and I've already basically have that blocked off. So that's the only thing that'll happen on a Wednesday. And mountain biking is my Tuesdays. That will change during the winter, I'm sure. Coaching calls are Thursday and Friday. Meetings with my team are Monday. I'm curious, you mentioned that you have your Calendly set up with different links for your podcast and for your business and for speaking. I'm just wanted to find out if you try to time block any of that. So the only podcasts that you do are Wednesday evening, or they're only evenings at 4 p.m. or something like that, where I might have a podcast on this day at this time.
Yeah, I also try to time block it around what's going on in the rest of the house, right? And so when I think about needing to record, try to do it in the morning when the neighbor's not mowing the lawn and things that I know are generally going on in the neighborhood. I don't try to do any podcast recording on the weekends when I know people might be in and out of their cars and driving around the neighborhood. So I think about time blocking in a lot of those ways too. And I don't work a traditional week. I don't work Monday to Friday. I do try to follow a bit of a creative process. I do about a 6 or 7 days straight, and then I take 4 days off. I find it's a lot better for the creative process. And some of those days, maybe half days, I go, grab a bike, go get outside. We'll see what happens in the winter, but balancing those things. And so Calendly plus connecting that with my Google Calendar allows me to do a lot of that blocking and customizing of each option. So
a lot of good stuff, Nikki. Just so you know, if you're listening right now, the link to her podcast is already in the show notes. Her bio is in the show notes. Her website is in the show notes. All of the different Zoom, Descript, Acadium, and Calendly, all of those resources are in the show notes as well. So if you want to connect with her, if you want to follow her and her podcast, jump on over there. And by the way, if you leave her a rating and a review, an honest rating and a review, let her know that you heard about her here on this podcast. I'm sure that she would be happy to hear that. It works what she's suggesting to go on OPP.
Exactly. And don't hesitate. I think that's true as it is for other podcasters. We're very approachable people. Most of us haven't gotten this vision of grandeur, but reviews are fantastic. They support our business. They support our hobby and our vision of what we're trying to build. Email, DM on social, all of it is fantastic. Don't hesitate to reach out. And I'd love to hear from you guys.
Awesome. All right. With that said, we're out. By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.